Today we will tell you about two medieval Portuguese fortress towns on the tops of mountains or hills that have preserved traces of the Reconquista.
You will learn about the structure of a typical medieval castle built by the Crusaders.
We'll mention the contribution to the Portuguese history of two more Christian military orders.
We will tell mainly about Marvao and a little about Castelo de Vide.
Here at the Foreign Visitors View YouTube channel, we continue to tell you about our trip around Portugal.
We are your guides,
Konstantin Krasovsky.
and Tatiana Andreeva.
This map shows the cities and towns that we have already covered in our previous videos.
And you can join our tours in Guimarães, Chaves, Bragança, Miranda do Douro, Guarda, Belmonte, Monsanto, Idania Avelia, and Castelo Branco.
Subscribe, hit the like button,
And leave your questions in the comments.
Marvão is located on one of the peaks of the Serra de São Mamede mountain range.
This range belongs to one of the most significant mountain ranges of the Iberian Peninsula, Montes de Toledo.
In the future, we will tell you about the city of Toledo in Spain, located on the Tagus River, which flows north of this mountain range.
And we crossed the same Tagus River when we drove from Castelo Branco.
However, in Spain it is called Tajo, and in Portugal Tejo.
We visited two important settlements located on the Serra de São Mamede mountain range, one after another. These are Castelo de Vide and Marvao.
Both are located on ridge-shaped hills, stretching from northwest to southeast.
We'll tell you who San Mamede is a little later.
All chapters are marked in the description. Feel free to switch.
We stopped in Castelo de Vide on our way to Marvao, of which this town was a part until 1276.
Historians testify that the fortress walls in Castelo de Vide were built and rebuilt under different kings to protect a growing populated area.
We stopped in Castelo de Vide for a few minutes and looked around a bit.
The stone fence near which we stopped turned out to be a military structure.
These walls hide a landmark, a tile depicting soldiers of the 8th Infantry Regiment.
This town also has its own colors. Unlike Castelo Branco, which is all white, Castelo de Vide is white with yellow stripes along the edges of the walls.
Like most cities on the Iberian Peninsula, Castelo de Vide has a Jewish quarter.
How the Jews got to Portugal and what happened to them here, we discussed in our video about Belmonte.
The Jewish quarter has an original synagogue, a Jewish fountain, and even the House of the Inquisition.
An interactive museum of the history of the Inquisition in Portugal.
The Castelo de Vide synagogue is one of only two surviving in Portugal from the period before the expulsion of the Jews.
It was built in the late 14th century.
The most prominent building is Igreja Martis Santa Maria da Devesa, the main church of Castelo de Vide.
It has the characteristic architecture of Catholic churches, with two high towers on the western facade, opposite the altar in the east.
The light is believed to come from the east and darkness from the west.
Exactly to protect from the darkness, these towers, called westworks, were built.
Another church located in the same square as the main church and not far from where we parked is Igreja de São João.
And the Baroque tower, seen from different points, belongs to the church called Igreja Parroquial de Santiago Mayor.
But there are many other churches, smaller ones. For example, at the roundabout, the Church of San Pedro, Igreja San Pedro, is situated.
They all have turrets of different shapes. That's another feature of Castelo de Vide.
On the opposite hill, I managed to take a photo of the chapel Ermida de Nossa Senhora da Penha. And later we passed the turn to the same Penha.
We leave Castelo de Vide and drive towards Marvao.
The Spanish border is in the same direction.
We are going higher and higher, 12 kilometers through forests and mountains.
Here and there, the hill which we aim to reach can already be seen above the road.
The history of Marvão, where we are going, is more diverse than that of the two previous cities visited.
Castelo Branco and Castelo de Vide were known only since the time of the Reconquista.
The quartzite rock as part of the Serra de São Mamede mountain range was an asset in a defensive strategy.
Historians point to numerous confrontations between different tribes and peoples whose front lines passed through these places.
Before the Roman conquest, the territory of present-day Marvao was at the crossroads of the lands inhabited by Celts, Lusitanians and Vetton.
During the Roman Empire, the town of Amaya was located here and in the neighboring San Salvador da Aramea.
And there is a sign on the road.
And in Marvao there was a Roman watchtower.
Later in the 5th-7th centuries, when a Roman rule in the Iberian Peninsula was replaced by Vandals, Suevi, Alans and Visigoths, the city of Amaya fell into decay.
Unlike Idania Avelia, which we talked about earlier.
This period was followed by the Arab conquest in the early 8th century, which lasted until the 12th century.
Although we find traces of Arabs in almost all cities visited in Portugal and Spain, as we move south they become more and more prominent.
Historians believe that Muslims tolerated the Jews and Christians who lived in the conquered territories as the representatives of more ancient religions, whose saints and prophets they recognized.
However, the struggle for influence took place between people from the Arabian Peninsula, the Berbers of North Africa, and the so-called Muwallats. Muwallat is formed from the word Muslim and the Arabic Uwallat, meaning son or descendant.
This was the name given to either Christians who converted to Islam or people of mixed origin, usually with an Arab father and a mother from the local population.
It is from the Muwallats that the leader Ibn Marwan, who started the uprising in 868, comes from.
A monument to this man can be found in the nowadays Spanish city of Badajoz, which he fortified, not far from the city of Elvas, which we visited later.
In 876 and 877, Ibn Marwan built a fortress on a hill, and it now bears his name, Marvao.
And this is how the monument to Ibn Marwan looks on the territory of the town itself, not far from the entrance to the castle.
We will have more reasons to talk about other events of the era of Arab rule when we get to the more southern cities of Portugal and Spain.
After the Reconquista, the integration of this territory in Portugal took place under Kings Sancho I and Afonso II.
Already in 1226, Marvao received a foral charter granting municipal rights, and the sign of this is the column or pillory, or pelourinho in Portuguese, of the 16th century in the central square.
We have already seen such pillars in Porto, Idania Avelha, Castelo Branco and many other places.
Unlike the lands north of the Tagus River that came under the control of the Knights Templar, as we saw in Monsanto, Idania Avelha and Castelo Branco,
the territory south of this river came under the control of the Knights Hospitaller, who also later became known as the Knights of Malta.
It is believed that they determined the structure of the castle.
We approach from the northeastern, flatter slope of the hill.
Here is the church and convent of Nossa Senhora da Estrela, that is Our Lady of the Star.
There is a legend that the last Visigothic king, Rodrigo, hid an image of Our Lady here before the Arab invasion, and it was found only after the territory was returned to Christians.
The convent is also a home for the elderly, and there is a health center nearby.
Not a bad combination for the Hospitallers, who descended from the more ancient Benedictine order with whom this image of Our Lady is associated.
We move up the Serpentine Road and see the impressive fortress wall.
As part of fortifications, a gate with a bend to slow down the advance of attackers.
There are quite a few fortifications here that remind of the presence of the Hospitallers.
This includes the gate on the opposite side of the town, through which, however, you cannot leave, and the castle itself.
Immediately at the entrance you will find information for tourists and a souvenir shop.
And we are moving along a very narrow street. Obviously, not all car drivers manage to fit in here. Perhaps the parking lot down the road could help.
We park in the central square, near the pillory. Our hotel Estalagem de Marvao is very close.
By the way, we highly recommend it. It was not only cozy to spend the night there, but also convenient to have clear guidelines on how to enter this medieval village, what to see around and in other cities.
We went on a walk towards the castle, first in the evening and then in the morning.
The castle occupies the entire northwestern, highest part of the hill.
The high main tower of the castle, the keep, can be seen from afar.
This is one of the important characteristics of castles built by the Crusaders, Hospitallers in particular.
In the morning, the entire hill was covered in a thick cloud, which we observed a lot in Portugal in December and in January.
Not far from the castle, there is a church-like building that now houses the municipal museum.
Even closer is a beautiful park with the name of the town and a request not to pick flowers.
The entrance to the castle is traditionally made elevated, probably so as to never be flooded.
Near the entrance there is also a cistern for collecting rainwater, which should be enough during the siege of the fortress.
Here are other important buildings for military life, the castle stove and toilet.
Having passed these first structures, we find ourselves in a large open space, which could have been used to house numerous town residents and the military.
The fortifications were built taking into account the rocky base and the steep southwestern slope of the hill.
The main courtyard of the castle is located at the northwestern tip of the hill.
It is framed by the main tower, warehouses, and numerous fortifications.
The defensive part has a multi-tiered structure and is surrounded by numerous turrets with arrow slits.
Fortress walls with passages inside connect various parts of the castle.
In general, this is a complex, multi-tiered, well-designed structure aimed to monitor what is happening around and to defend.
Other buildings in the town also have their own specifics. We return to the hotel, have breakfast, and leave Marvao.
We drive to the southern gate and return along Rua de Baixo, the lower street, to the northern gate.
Even despite the organized one-way traffic, not all cars fit into these streets, and not all drivers feel well here.
We go down the hill along a picturesque road, and at some point, we get out of the cloud.
Here we are, in the mountain range of Serra de São Mamede, or St. Mames Range.
We already heard about this saint when we got acquainted with the history of Guimarães.
He is mentioned in connection with the monastery, castle and battle site, which were important in the history of the city and Portugal in general.
São Mamede was a child martyr who died for the Christian faith in the second half of the 3rd century at the hands of pagan executioners.
We were unable to find information about when and why the name of this saint was chosen to designate the mountain range and its highest peak.
But in the territory returned to Christian rule, it was quite logical to use the name of a person who suffered for the Christian faith.
This happened in the now Turkish city of Kayseri, the capital of Cappadocia.
Look at the pictures of Christian saints left by people who lived in caves in Seganlı, Kayseri province.
Perhaps we'll talk about this place someday too.
In the meantime, we invite you to watch our other videos about previously visited cities in Portugal.
Therefore, subscribe to the channel, put thumbs up and share the video with your friends.
Your guides were with you
Konstantin Krasovsky
and Tatiana Andreeva.
See you in the next city or country.